So I'd like to, first of all, welcome Indranath Mukherjee. Indranath, thank you so much for agreeing to do this session with us. Indranath, as you all know, has over 2 decades of industry experience in analytics, having worked with Deloitte, Accenture, EXL, and Fractal prior to joining AXA. He's also been recognized as one of the top 50 minds in analytics in India by Analytics India magazine. He's a product of St. Xavier's College, Calcutta, and then, of course, did his MA and MPhil at Jawaharlal Nehru University. So, you know, some great educational institutions that he's learned his trade from. So, Indranath, without delaying this much more, they're here to hear you, not me. So I shall pass on to you, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, everyone, and probably good morning, everybody. So somewhere, I think last year, I was in conversation with Sarab, and he requested me if I could come to Mohali, and probably there was an opportunity where I could meet some of you in person, but that did not materialize because my schedule did not work out. I had some travel and a few other things. But here we are meeting virtually in this time when everything is happening, online, and this is probably the way our future, will be defined in terms of how we work, how you communicate. A lot of it will happen through online. So I will kind of give you a bit of context of the topic and then talk about it. But before I start, how much time kind of we have today?
So Indranath, we typically keep this as an hour session, but we are more than happy for it to continue. So the last 2 went up to an hour and a half. So take your time. We're here to learn from you.
Sure. So I will. The reason I asked is how much do I want to talk about it, and how what pace I should do it is important. So first of all, a bit of technical, I'd say, notification is that my work laptop doesn't allow Zoom, so I cannot use my laptop that is given from my work. And my personal laptop is now used at this moment by my daughter because she's having an online class. So I have dialed in through my phone. What is the reason I'm saying that is that I will not be able to share anything because the phone with share doesn't work. And the positive part of it, we always kind of keep sharing a PowerPoint, and between PowerPoints and conversation, we tend to divert our attention. So it's a bit different. I'll just talk. Try to talk slowly. At any point in time, I may kind of give some examples, and if you have anything to share, or I may actually would like it to be a little interactive. So if you have something to share, either speak up, or if chat button is better, because if you start speaking, there could be a lot of noise. So feel free to use the chat button when I kind of ask you to. Then that will make me also understand or realize how much of what I am saying is being communicated in the right fashion. Okay. So the topic that I will talk about is machine learning at scale. And there are 3 issues that I would highlight. They are fairness, reliability, and explainability. So what do I mean by that? I mean, my assumption is that all of you have, and given some of the past topics that I know in the last 2 weeks, you have had Madhukar and Atul spoke to you. So you have a certain background in data science or machine learning. Is that a fair assumption? Is there a kind of yeah, okay, I get a yes, and that's useful. Great. So in many times, what we see is that, okay, we have a machine learning model, and we, from a technical perspective, we do a lot of validation of our model. Without going into detail of the validation techniques and all. So when we have a model which is validated and we're happy about the model performance, we say, okay, this model is giving us good results. But when we are deploying a model in a production system, whether it's for a corporations or it's for a government or for any kind of entities, we kind of deploy a model to make certain decisions. The decision is more data-driven, more we like to call it scientific. It's more automated decisions. There are certain intrinsic challenges when we want to take certain decisions based on machine learning kind of algorithmic decisions. And the three issues that I want to talk about are those challenges. So I will talk, kind of introduce each of those challenges first, and then may also give some examples how those challenges are kind of problem in real life. And then also talk about, to some extent, what are the possible ways to mitigate those challenges. So the first issue that we want to talk about is fairness. In today's world, fairness could be interpreted in different ways. So we'll start with a simple example. Okay. So, for example, we want to say I am a representative of a government authority, and I want to implement something around, say, a health recommendation. Everybody has to do something, whether it's take certain kind of test or something around health recommendation. And before I start implementing, I want to understand the issue from the public itself. So I kind of design a survey. And so I design a survey, I release the survey, I get the survey responses. So they form my data, and I use that data to kind of develop some kind of algorithm to throw away some decisions. Now, let's assume that my survey is designed only in one language. And so, for example, let's consider Hindi as that language. So I roll out the survey, and it's a nationwide survey. Because the survey is only designed in Hindi, it's just one language, I get response. So survey responses are, in general, are not, we don't get survey responses from everybody the survey is sent to. But let's just, for assumptions, let's assume that most of the people respond to the survey. But here, people who are only able to understand or say read Hindi and respond in Hindi will be able to respond. Say Tamilian person who is not exposed to Hindi language from Chennai will probably not be able to respond to the survey. Or a person who is in, say, in the northeast of India, who may not understand Hindi, who is more comfortable with the local language, will not be able to respond to the survey. So the data that I receive will have a bias for the towards the Hindi-speaking region of our country. And hence, when I use that data to develop an algorithm, it will have an inherent bias. And that bias will be reflected. And when I recommend something for the whole nation, it might discriminate certain sections of the country. So that's kind of the concept of fairness. To give you another example, I mean, if you have followed issues like, things that happened a few years back, which is, in Google News. So we saw that some of the algorithms that they had were inherently, and nobody actually in the beginning was bothered that, okay, why is it showing certain results? It was discriminating between Hispanic populations in the US vis-a-vis other populations. So the reason they found it out was, is probably I'll address at the later half of the presentation when we talk about explainability as a challenge or as a risk. But what happened is few results which were unfair to certain section of the population. So fairness is primarily, in machine learning, when fairness is primarily defined as something when the result has a bias against certain section of the population, which is more of, so it's a discriminatory for a specific group. What happens is if I say apply for a loan, and I know that the bank has, so if you know about kind of credit scoring or debit scoring kind of thing, so bank has a policy, say if in a 10-point scoring, anybody whose score is 8 or above, they approve the loan. But anybody who is kind of below 8, they don't approve the loan. And somebody say might have a score of say 7.8 and they don't get the loan. And we might say, yeah, that's a model is scoring. We have a very robust, multivariate model, and it's probably giving us the right results. But if we figure out that one of the variable in the model is looking at maybe my race or my caste or my religious belief or my political belief, and that is impacting my score adversely and giving me a score of 7.8, which otherwise could have been 8.5, is discriminating me against something. I mean, is the point clear what I'm trying to address about what is discriminating here in this case? A simple yes and no will be good for me to understand that you're following what I'm saying, and then I will. Great, I got one yes. That's great. Thank you, Daman. Thanks, Ashita. Thanks, Nandesh. Thank you. This is a reflection of historical decision making. So, Devraj, thank you. So, what I want to say is that it's historical in the sense I'll bring that. So, what happens? It's also in case of human decision made. Yes, it could be because of human decision made. Now, the issue is a lot of it is also regulatory. In the sense, my regulator, and in most of the countries, if you know about regulations, for example, say in Europe, if you know, the European Union last year in May, actually 2019, I'm forgetting the exact date, but it was somewhere in May, they introduced something called GDPR. So if you know, if you are aware of something called GDPR, it's General Data Protection Regulation. So a lot of it is about data sensitivity, but then it also has, in his article it said, and it's also there in a lot of other countries like North America as well, that no decisions, for example, whether I'll get approval of a loan or something, could be determined on the basis of my caste, my race, my skin color, my religious belief, or my political belief. Now, if historically human decisions were such that, okay, this person is, say, and I'll give different country example. Say, for example, in US, they said, and in the current scenario of what's happening in the US, if there is very likely that human decisions, I mean, the way human minds work, we have our inherent bias in our mind. So we say, okay, if somebody is black, is more likely to not repay a loan without looking at any historical data. So they might just taken decisions of not giving loans or assigning probability, a higher probability of not repaying, and that might get reflected in future decisions. But most of the regulators try to stop that, because there is absolutely no reason to believe that somebody's skin color would determine somebody's likelihood of paying back a loan or not. So as a practitioner, when you could be at a different stage of decision making. You could be a developer of somebody who's building the model. You could be somebody who is a consumer of the model, in the sense you take the model results and take a decision. You could be a regulator to ensure that when it's a human decision making, it's very easy to track it. That, okay, decision is being taken because somebody thought this and this is what's happening. But the topic that we are trying to address is machine learning at scale. So if you have an algorithm deployed in your production system, and you have, say, 1 million customers, you don't end up going back to what's happening for each of the customer. You look at the score, you make a decision that, okay, it's 7.8 versus 8. So 7.8 doesn't get a loan, 8 gets a loan. In this kind of scenario, it's very important that our algorithm is fair. In some countries, in most of the countries, in most of the developed countries, the regulatory body takes care of it. The example being GDPR for European Union, where corporations, whether it's a private organizations or it's a public run organization, they need to make sure that they are not including any features like race or caste or their political or religious belief in the data. So part of it is that when you look at the variables, I remove those variables before doing the model. But in many cases, we even don't get to know that such variable exists. For example, if our data to some extent is based on survey, and if the survey is the survey has come from specific region, the example I started with, the Hindi speaking region. If a survey has been given to specific zip codes, think of US, and think of any country where people of different ethnicities, they tend to stay close to each together. So they may be present, there may be more density of them in one zip code or one pin code. So there could be inherent bias in the data. So it's very important for us to understand the bias. The other aspect is, for example, if you are in California and if you are trying to develop a model for determining price of insurance for a car. So if somebody is trying to insure a car, what would be the premium? You're trying to develop the model. So if you are developing the model in a state like New York, you are free to use gender as a variable. And you can discriminate between male and female driver. If you have enough historical data to show that, I'll take the question. If you have enough historical data to show that male or female drivers, one of them is a better risk compared to other, you are free to use it. But if you are doing it for California, there is a strict regulation that gender cannot be used. But what happens is, if you have color of car as a variable, there could be some strong correlation. And we need to understand all of that while looking at the data. It could be that male probably prefers certain kind of colors in the car, whereas the females can prefer some other kind of color. It could be bright shade, light shade, it could be red, brown, gray, it could be anything. The key concept I'm trying to mention here is that there could be variables which are correlated to some features which we can use. It will again discriminate some certain things, and our ML algorithm could become discriminatory, and hence can somebody point out saying that there is unfairness there. Okay, this is a question. There is a skew in any case based on low education and skills. How can you protect against the fact that historical discrimination had created correlation between race and other variables like education and income? Exactly. Thank you. So these kind of correlations, it could be, correlation between race and education, race and income. And as I said, the example that I gave was less probably political or less controversial, the car color and gender, the color of the vehicle or gender, but the concept-wise, they are all very same. It could be certain correlation exists, but one need to understand those correlations, the causality very carefully. And to be very frank, even today, we do not have a clear path of how we can have totally unfair algorithm, and how to develop an algorithm which will definitely be unfair, especially in the era when we talk about big data, because there is so much of data. There is so much of data created by us, not only through survey, through our interaction in social media, that there are very subtle correlations, and which could make use of those data in our algorithms inherently biased. But this is a challenge that regulatory bodies across the world are dealing with. And we, as practitioners, I would like us to believe that we will drive the growth of data-driven decision-making in our country or in other countries, wherever we are. We should be aware of this, and we should be conscious of this. And a part of our effort should be towards doing more research around, okay, how our algorithm should be less discriminatory to certain group, especially, more protected minorities group, because an algorithm-driven decision-making is going to be the future. There will be less and less human intervention. But when I talk about a little bit more around explainability, and later you will see how these kind of intrinsic risks are interrelated. And unless we are very conscious about it and we work towards it when we are developing our algorithm, if it's deployed at scale, the kind of results we get could lead to a lot of further discrimination in our society, which is obviously something undesirable. Okay. So that's kind of, in a very nutshell, I wanted to introduce the concept, give some examples around fairness. Hope that kind of gave a sense of how fairness is an intrinsic risk associated with algorithm-driven, machine learning kind of algorithm-driven decision-making. This could be there very much in human decision-making as well. But the difference, as I mentioned earlier, if it's human-driven, one can see it, that, okay, this is how it's happening. But if it's algorithm-driven, if you have 50 different variables and the combination of such variables, their interrelations, driving a score, it's not very easy to understand it. That's why when we are deploying machine learning at scale, it's more important that you look at fairness as an intrinsic risk. And when we are developing a model, we do our best to make sure that we take care of these kind of issues. Okay. Should our expectations from AI be greater than what we have as humans? Oh yes, survey questions can also definitely be discriminatory. We always want AI to be unbiased, something that is rare in humans. And can we ever achieve it given humans are the teachers of AI? That's a great question, or I would say comment. That is the big challenge. As I said, that it's very, because say we are the ones who will, say if it's a survey, we'll design the survey. So there's a huge chance that survey question could be discriminatory. We human beings are today generating more data than ever. And if we are generating our data, those we have its inherent bias. So AI, which is completely free of bias, is probably a more theoretical construct than a reality. But as ethical practitioners, if we are conscious that we will try to ensure that things which are more revealed data and less of where our conscious bias come in, we should try to ensure that in more. So for example, if I'm getting into a car insurance, and if I try to see more about driving behavior of drivers, speed, certain change in speed, time of driving, the kind of road they have driven on. And in today's world, when there are, IoT devices fit in the car, which takes away how many, jars. So if we use those kind of variables, then a driver's gender, their race, their caste, we are more likely to get better evaluation of risk than if we start using more kind of demographic variables. So fairness is a concept which you will understand if you read more, if you look at some of the research that is going on. You will see that the less you use demographic kind of variables, it's more useful. And what I will do is, I will probably, there is some great work that is going on. There is a great paper which is around AI fairness 360. There are a bunch of researchers there. Some of them are actually Indians as well. It's a fantastic toolkit to help us detect bias while we are training a model and we are pre-processing them. It helps kind of detect those bias at an early stage. And I would like I would the email that came to me with the meeting details, if I share those resources, will that reach everyone? Okay, so what I will do is, after I, is it fair to predict the price of insurance on base of cost? Yes, Vijay, it's not fair to predict, but it's likely if we use more gender and zip code, because zip code is in US it's used a lot in pricing, and what happens in zip code, we may have consolidations of certain race or caste in certain zip, so there could be certain things. So what I will do is definitely I will share some of these resources. For example, this paper is AI Fairness 360 degree, is a fascinating toolkit, and they're evolving it. And part of our work depends is also research, because I work for an insurance company and we want to kind of make sure we have ethical practice and so we use this toolkit, and if you just go through this paper, and a good part about today's world is all these papers are open source. I'll share the link. You can download the PDF, read the paper, use these toolkits, and when you are doing some work, this will help you. So, and I will kind of, in all these assets, there are a number of resources, and somewhere today, I will send those links I'll kind of put all of them in an email and write that what is what, and share it to the email that came to me with the invite, and you can all access that. Okay, so the next issue that I will talk about is a bit of reliability. That what is very important is yes, Sujit. Yeah. There are, if you in the papers if you read the papers, you will see a lot of applications areas where they are applying, and it's applied across varied domain, in varied industry, in public sector, in education, in health, in across domain. I may end up giving insurance examples because that's the domain I work on continuously. I can give examples from other examples as well, but you will be able to, when I share those resources, when you access them, you'll see they have wider applications. Okay, the next issue that I will introduce is reliability. Now, fairness is an issue which is more ethical. Now, reliability is an issue which is more around how robust are my results. The simplest example, if you have seen, is, and if you have seen the way in the last actually 6 to 8 years, this field has kind of taken huge jump, especially in the application of deep learning. The ability to predict with higher accuracy has increased significantly from 2012 onwards. One classic example when you talk about model robustness is given as, if you're trying to predict, if you look at the picture and trying to predict, okay, if it's a cat or not, and if you have 500 pictures of only white cats, then you train a model based on that, and then your model, the algorithm is applied on a black cat, it's likely that your model might fail because in your training data, there is not enough, there is no representation of a black cat. So this is a very simplistic example, but the theme here is your model should be generalized enough. It should be able to predict all types of possible features. So if it's predicting animals of a certain kind, so a cat was the example, if your training data have all different breeds of cat, different colors, then your training algorithm is likely to produce prediction results which are more robust. It can look at any cat and should be able to predict that as a cat instead of a different animal or a different entity altogether. Why this is important is we all try to look at data accuracy and a lot of it, but something that has started happening very recently in the last few years, which is called adversarial attack. To kind of, any of you are aware of what is adversarial attack or adversarial impact? Okay, so I'm getting yes and no, both answer, which is great. So I'll give an example. The example, for a moment, what I will do is I'll show a photograph. Okay. And the way I'll show the photograph, I'll just turn the camera from me towards the photograph and then I'll talk about it. Okay. Just look at this photograph. I hope everybody will be able to see this. So what I'm trying to show is I have a panda, a photograph of a panda. And then what I have, I'm showing you is that it's just you can see some colors and a coefficient of 0.007 multiplied it by it. And then what it's showing as the model result, it's identifying this as a gibbon. Okay. So just I wanted to show the photograph to explain the concept a little better. Okay. You saw the photograph, all of you able to see the photograph? And here again, I'll show some examples, give some resources around it. So in what happens in many cases, suppose I have a model in production and which has an algorithm, and I believe my model is fairly robust because I had input data which has features, fairly robust features, represented all possible characteristics of what I am trying to predict. Now, in the last few years, the cyber attacks, now there could be something. This is an example I'm showing because this is easy to explain also to some extent, that these are, and adversarial impact attacks more in kind of neural network kind of models in deep learning. And they are targeted attacks. If somebody wants us to have incorrect result as in the production, they might hack our system and might just tweak it certainly. So what you saw in the picture, somebody might probably have just added something. So in neural networks, what we have different layers. So they might just add a layer at the end, which is just a small pixel and something like that. And that may have a very significant impact in the output. This, if you haven't done much of deep learning, it may be a little difficult to understand, but just trust my word. What happens is the way neural network works, that's how our nerves respond to something. So if you have a child at home who hasn't seen any photograph of a cat or a dog, the child will not be able to identify a cat or dog as a cat or dog. So the way a child learn, or the way human being learn is, we look at different cats, we look at dogs, we look at different kind of photographs, and our nerve, and obviously our human nerve is very strong. And deep learning, neural networks, they try to emulate those, how human neural system works. But because it is not the way exactly how human beings work, it's kind of vulnerable. So one can tweak this with a very minute tweak, the result may be significantly different. And one can have very different interest for doing this. And this is a challenge that in many cases we have seen, and we actually, through a lot of research, we still do not have a very straightforward answer to it, that, okay, this is how this kind of adversarial impact could be overcome. So one part is that, before coming to adversarial attacks, what we can do as a practitioners or a developers of such models, we can make sure that we have enough representations of everybody, of all possible. For example, the example I started with for health recommendation. So we can design the survey in, say, 23 different languages, or all the possible languages which are the official languages by Indian Constitution. And that way we will get a far richer representation in our survey response. So that is one aspect that which we can take care. We take, white cat, brown cat, black cat, all possible sort of cats in our input model while developing the deep learning model. That is something that we can be very conscious and can consciously take care of it. That, okay, we have enough representation in our input data such that our model will be reliable, it will be robust. But if there are targeted adversarial attacks of this kind in a model which is deployed, we won't be able to figure it out. So again, there are certain ways to look at it. And these happens in text data also. And I will again share some resources, share some examples. A negative sentiment with some quick change of work, some terrible, say if some text has a word like terrible and you make it horrible, a sentiment may certainly be reversed. So this could, this kind of could happen on text data, on audio data, on video data, on visual. It's less likely to happen on structured tabular data. But in today's world, if you look at, we have more unstructured data than structured data. So if we have more unstructured data, our model is more susceptible towards such adversarial attacks. So there are ways to mitigate such attacks, but none of them is foolproof. So as I will provide some resources, but if you look at your, if you want to just do some studying, look at how those kind of adversarial robustness issue can be tackled using confidence matrix. If you have a neural network kind of model, look up something like a softmax function, SOFTMAX, softmax function, and I will give you all these resources. I'll just put everything in together and send an email. If you have a random forest of model, what are the kind of proportion trees in agreement? So there are for different kind of algorithm, there are different functions, which if you put in a layer, that to some extent can take care of certain attacks, but none of these are foolproof yet. But the reason I'm talking about it is because these are real issues that if you have such algorithms in production at play, they are susceptible to such risk. And if we are not aware, we'll not even know how our models are getting tweaked and how the model results are giving away unexpected results, which are going to make our decision making totally lopsided. So I will give you SSL, like what is softmax function, how those things, some of it are very mathematical and technical, and you need to practice quite a bit of it and read up, and you have my email access to some extent. If further, if you need some help, some guidance, send me an email. I'd be happy to kind of address them, or we can in future, we can, when some of you go back and read up some of these literature, some of the resources, we can look back, we can reconnect and discuss when you are more aware of these concepts and all of this. But in today's lecture, I wanted to make sure that you are aware of this and then we'll follow up with some reading. But from a reliability or robustness perspective, the two issues that I wanted to highlight, if I summarize, one is in our input data, we should have very strong representations of all possible features of what we are trying to predict. That is something that we can be very cautious of doing. What our model or our algorithms are vulnerable to is this kind of adversarial impact, adversarial attacks. And we could try and do something to take care of it. It is still not foolproof, but some of you are strong research mindset, this is a fascinating area where you can do some research and can actually come up with some original findings. And this is something where we may create maximum impact if we come up with something which is new and which is taking care of robustness instead of implementing some of the existing research. So there are different ways how you visualize the research. But coming to the concept of reliability or robustness, are the two aspects fairly clear? Your input data should be take care of strong robustness, and you should be aware of this kind of targeted attacks, and may want to have some kind of, if you are aware of attacks, what do? We try to create some protection. The protection may or may not work, but it's always good to have those protection. Okay, so I will now introduce the third and probably the most critical aspect, which is explainability. Okay, I'll just take a moment's break. So we have, and I believe, and I had a look at some of the webinar sessions that you have, and I think you have a future webinar with someone who will talk about explainable AI or interpretable AI, which is a lot about, what I am talking about explainability. So this is one of your future ones, right? Or you already have it? Oh, next week. Oh, great. Yeah. I mean, Sarab shared that with me that this is one of your future one. So what I will do is that I will introduce it, the concept, and probably and I will again share some resources. So you'll probably be able to relate a lot when you understand, when you hear from Vikas Agarwal next week about this topic. Now, while this is, as much as we should focus on fairness and reliability, explainability is very important, because machine learning has, there is a conception, there's a perception that machine learning is a black box. That we put some data and something happens and the result comes out of a black box. Now, in reality, machine learning is not a black box. But what happens is, if we believe it's a black box, then we cannot explain or we cannot interpret our results. So if we have to treat the result as the final word, and we take it or we don't take it. Now, this is a big problem, because if we are getting results, if you go back to the fairness discussions, that we are constantly saying it's discriminating against certain religion, certain caste, certain race, there's something that needs to be explained. Okay, the regulator might just stop that you cannot do this. So if you, as an organization, you spend millions of rupees or dollars to develop models, then deploy them in your system, and then your regulator comes and you cannot use it. So interpretability is that our ability to interpret or explain the results. And it's two resources which I will, I'll share them anyway, but I will talk about this also. There's very interesting, fascinating work going on. One is called kind of an organization in US called FAT. FAT is actually US military's kind of research wing. When the FAT is kind of, it's fairness, accountable, and transparent. So they are doing a huge amount of research, and I'll share the resources. If you go to their website, you'll find doing a lot of research to make sure that algorithmic decision makings are fair, accountable, and transparent. And the other one is XAI, which is explainable AI. These two are, two probably the best resources of this kind of things. And then there are some very critical papers. Again, I'll share all of that. But coming back to the explainability, there could be certain situations where we don't need explainability or interpretability. We may have a machine learning algorithm which is doing something and we are fine with it. And I'll give you some examples. If you say a practice which is not very common in today's digital world is writing letters. But still, postal department gets a lot of posts for they normal post or speed post or something like that. They get a lot of letters still today because things need to go. And given a country like India, which is largely rural, so if you have seen, as people who have been to, Delhi, if you are going towards Delhi airport, there is a big building which is, and it says it's an automated classifies. It's an automated system which classifies these envelopes by the PIN code written. Okay, so if its first letter digit is 7, first digit is 1, it kind of. And a lot of it is handwritten, right? When we write on the envelope, some of it is, they're typewritten. But if it's handwritten, the way I write 7, some people may write 7 as 1. So there is a kind of rule-driven algorithm which looks at those handwritten results and classifies these results. So they kind of separates the envelope which will go to which region. And this is a result which is today's, produces fairly accurate classifications. It's not 100% accurate. Not every letter reaches to its destined address, but it's fairly accurate. Now, if it's fairly accurate and we know that more than 85 to 90% cases, the algorithm looks at the zip code and classifies it correctly, we do not necessarily need to go back. And it's also, the problem is well studied. It's doing it for a number of years. We don't necessarily need to go at interpretability and look at, okay, why for 5% of the cases it's failing. There is always good to improve the results, but it's always hard to get 100% accuracy. But the key message here is, if your problem is very well studied, then we need not always kind of look at interpretability or explainability. The other aspect is, say if your algorithm doesn't have any significant impact, then we also need not go back to interpret or explainable. When I say significant impact, for example, I give you an example. So one of you look at your friend's Facebook post or Instagram post and study all the photographs of their past travel. It's okay, they have gone to these places this year, last year. And you trying to develop a deep learning model and say that, okay, I will try and predict that, look at last 5 years, somebody say, Vikas went to these places, I have this many photographs. I use those photographs and try to predict, okay, next summer, Vikas will go to, I'll say, Himachal Pradesh. Okay, I'll go to Shimla. And I try to say, hey, Vikas, you are going to try to produce the result to Vikas. It may be incorrect or correct, but Vikas said, no, I have actually planned to go to Goa this summer. But it's okay for your result not to be, you cannot interpret or cannot explain your result, why it's kind of produced a result which is so different. You kind of predicted, your deep learning model predicted a hill station, whereas he's actually going to sea beach. So it's a very different result, but it doesn't matter because it's not significant. Unless you kind of running a travel agency and assume that he is going to go to Shimla, got his ticket, hotel booking and everything, that's a different ballpark. So why the point that I'm trying to make, if your model has some significant impact, you have to know why, what are the, how the prediction is coming. So an explainability or interpretability means even if you have 30 different variables, which variable is impacting your model in what way, it must know. And interpretability has, again, it's a, a funny way of saying, there are also calamities can absolutely, yeah, there are different ways this could impact. And interpretability has also have kind of loose interpretation. Somebody say, okay, I give all my source code and model algorithm, and I'm explaining my model. That's kind of a loose definition. A stronger definition is, for each of the variables and combination of variables, we are able to look at how they are impacting my results, is what actually stronger sense of interpretability. And I'll give some technical, again, I'll throw away some technical terms here, and but they may not, this might sound a little difficult, but they are actually not much difficult. So there are a lot of research going on model interpretability. And again, you can write it down, but don't necessarily need to write it down. I'll share this. So for first interpretable results is a very seminal papers, but this is called LIME, L-I-M. So what it's called, it's local interpretable model agnostic explanations. So there is a fantastic paper on LIME. I'll share the paper as well. Yeah, it's great to write it in the chat. Thank you. So LIME is a way to look at interpretability. I'd say explore. It's a beautiful paper written by an Indian professor and some of his supervisors. Then something that I use a lot of cases because it goes well with the kind of model we build. It's something called LOCO. So the next is LOCO. LOCO is another techniques. So LOCO's full form is leave one covariate out. Very simple calculations and very powerful results for interpretable model result. Then there is something which I haven't explored much. I have read a little bit, but I will share anyway. It's called ELI5, which is E-L-I, then the number 5, which is kind of explain like I am 5. And I'm sure that a lot of these will be discussed in further details maybe on next week's webinar. So explain like I'm 5 means you should be explain a machine learning model or deep learning model to a 5-year-old. That's how it should be. It's not a black box at all. But what I understood is that ELI5 also follows the LIME framework. So it's the framework, the technical framework it follows, it's the LIME framework. The other one, which is more recent and giving very strong and robust results, it's called Shapley value or Shapley regression. So just write SHAP. Exactly. Why should I trust you is that LIME paper? Absolutely. But Shapley additive explanations is the fourth one. SHAP or Shapley, and I will share this. So go through these and you will find that what is the perception for what is known as the machine black box is actually eminently explainable. And when you are able to explain your model, this not only gives you comfort in using the model, if there is a bug, if you then related to the robustness, if you suddenly find that hey, there is the result is supposed to be this because of my explainability framework, but I'm getting some other result. So if debugging a model becomes also easy. But if you have a black box, you have no clue what happened, you'll have to go back to your raw data, start building the model again. So interpretability not only has the transparency impact, it's also give you an, makes you accountable that, okay, I'm making these decisions because these variables is giving me this kind of interpretable results, but it also helps you debug your model. Just to summarize, there are different techniques for interpretability, as I said, line, loco, Li5, or Shapley value. But while we are developing machine learning models and we are trying to deploy this in a production system, these are not easy. This requires a lot of investment, a lot of money, that you have an algorithm which is through multiple variables. You need to code those variables in the technology system, technology platform, and then implement it. These are very capital intensive. Making those investments to take decisions, while you are doing that, it's very important we understand the inherent risk. And the risks that we discussed today are fairness, the robustness or reliability, and explainability or interpretability. And I think we discussed it. I tried to discuss it in a very simplistic term, giving some examples. What I will do, I will share some resources, read through them, and you will find. I mean, it's very timely that your next week's webinar is about interpretability, and over time, when through the series, you will see how these concepts are very critical, and they're very dependent on each other. And when you are in a position, when you are developing a model, when you are deploying a model, be conscious of this and do your best to make sure that the models that you are developing are fair, are reliable, and explainable. So that's all I wanted to say. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. And as I promised, I will share an email with all the resources that I talked about. And some of it I may not have talked about, but I know they are very important resources. I will share all of it with you. Hopefully you'll find them interesting. And hopefully from the discussion today, the concept of fairness, robustness or reliability and explainability makes some sense to you in the context of both developing, but more importantly, deploying or implementing this machine learning algorithms in the production system. So I'll stop here. If you have any questions, you can speak up or write. Otherwise, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Indranath. That was really, really enjoyable. I think we live in a world where whenever we talk about machine learning models, everybody's talking about getting high accuracy. But you have brought up three very, very important alternative dimensions that are key, right? And I worry about the fact that a lot of AI that's being deployed in the world is not taking any of these three into account, right?
Absolutely.
So,
yes.
Fairness, of course, I think there is so much of unfairness in the world that I think it's great for us to strive for fairness in general. And then this whole concept of reliability. I remember when we were, starting off in the recommender system space, also everybody, the researchers were all focused on how can you create more interesting, more accurate models. But then a big topic came up around attacks on recommender systems, right? So where publishers were attacking Amazon's recommender system to make it, recommend their books, their new books, right? Whenever somebody wanted to see Harry Potter's books. This is fantastic. I'm really highly appreciative of the talk you've given here. And like, luck would have it, Vikas will be continuing on the explainability side also, which I think is hugely important. Are there any, Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, so that I think that is a very nice coincidental continuance of the discussion. But as you said,
Yes.
we try to thrive about the most fanciest model giving us the most accurate results. But these are very fundamental issues, not just for us to be more ethical practitioners, but also from regulators to make sure what we are doing is practical for use. These are very critical issues. Yeah, you summed it up very nicely.
I have one question. You had mentioned GDPR, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's struggling to implement GDPR. How achievable is it really for an insurance company or any company really? I guess you may not be able to talk about insurance specifically because of the fact that you're working for them. But when we think about the fact that there is so much textual data that is out there with personally identifiable information in there, and our ability to extract that and identify that is still very limited in AI. Is GDPR truly achievable?
It's a very, very relevant and great question. And given that, I work for an insurance company, we have business all across the world, but it's headquartered in France, which is in Europe, which is part of, subject to GDPR. And we are fairly big in France in terms of our business, in Europe in terms of our business. It's so difficult to adhere to all the articles of GDPR. But the regulators are also so stringent. We are right now trying, if this is a prescription, we are trying our best to adhere to it. To be honest, we haven't achieved the level of what it is asking us to be. And at this point in time, it's not possible to adhere to all the articles, recommendations of GDPR because they are extremely stringent. And we don't know. For example, if say, you cannot use anything that is sensitive information, and what is sensitive information and what is not is also up for debate. And we are trying not to use, as much as possible, not to use informations which are personally identifiable, personally can be related, rather than we use more of behavioral data that kind of will help us. And you will see, in the future, customer-centric model will be more behavioral modeling than demographic kind of modeling, because the world will be more sensitive towards personally identifiable data. At the same time, if we try to be more care less about personally identifiable data at a different level. But I think as regulators will keep us honest on that. So while GDPR is extremely difficult to be achievable, but if we move towards more behavioral modeling, I think we'll get to a point which will be somewhat acceptable.
Yes, thank you. And actually, when you were talking about fairness, many years ago, I was living in Northern Ireland, and there the Catholics and Protestants were at each other's necks, right? There was a lot of fighting between them. And at that time, the law came out that you cannot discriminate in jobs again, based on religion or whether you're a Catholic or a Protestant. But of course, people got around that by asking the candidate which school they went to. And even there were these rumors about physical appearance differences that can allow you to identify whether somebody's a Catholic or a Protestant. So there's so many variables out there that correlate with these things that I think it's very difficult, right? I think to really move those out. There's a question here.
The question from Jogesh, GS Jogesh. Yeah. So information asymmetry in insurance industry, I think that's, two of the key part of insurance is asymmetry of information and how that lead to adverse selection is very critical. So in today's world, say information asymmetry may come from two sources. One is lack of enough data, which is today is not that big a deal. But if we rely on survey data, there is chance that when people are filling up survey, the chances of more insurance asymmetries, more information asymmetry is there. So one of the recommendations for developing models is also use less of survey-driven data in any kind of, because survey will have, you never know how accurate the results are, because what people write in a survey and how people actually behave, there is a huge gap. So in terms of insurance asymmetry, today the availability of data is fairly strong enough to have fairly to mitigate the insurance information asymmetry. It's a big problem in insurance, but we try to, as I said, we are trying to give you an example about, say, although I work in a more about specialty insurance, for example, if we insure art in museums, so it's very difficult to price them. If an art piece gets stolen, what is the price of it? So that's one aspect of our specialty insurance. The other aspect is there's a lot of abstract insurance. So we have lack of data and all of this. Very difficult modeling challenges those are. But say insurance around life or car or home, we have enough data to take care of insurance asymmetry. We have enough history of driving history. So in today's world, I think that's less of a challenge today.
So for those who are not from the industry, could you explain what information asymmetry is?
Yeah, so insurance asymmetry is when you have, for example, you have information about drivers, and you have, and I'm giving you a very simple example. You have data from a country where most of the drivers are male. And that happens in many countries. If you look around, that. So that way, when you are trying to price, and if there is somebody who is a female driver, and if you have a gender as a variable in your pricing model, if your data has more, very skewed for male driver, that's a source of insurance information asymmetry. That's also give you discriminatory result. That's a fairness issue. That will give you unreliable result because your input data is not representative enough. So all these are fairly, and if you can explain your result because you have gender as a variable. So you see all these insurance information asymmetry, fairness, explainability, and reliability. There's all related issues.
Great, thank you.
So GradCam performs the same way for explaining how cyber insurance comes out and how data science is playing the role. So I'll explain that. So what is a GradCam? What is that? Nikhil?
So I think the question is around whether GradCam is a similar explainable AI technique. So I haven't come across it myself, but
so even I haven't. Yes, it's visual explanations from deep networks. Must be something around that. I haven't done much, work around GradCam, but it looks like something similar in the deep learning space.
Yes.
Yeah. So Nikhil, it's a good thing to do research on.
Okay, any other questions?
Okay.
Well, sir, thank you so much. It's really been very enjoyable, like I said, listening to all the points you brought up here. And as I said, it's a very different dimension to the typical accuracy-focused discussions that happen in this space. So thank you again, and I hope you will consider coming back and talking to us again sometime in the future.
Sure. No, I enjoyed talking to all of you, and hope you found it useful. So thank you, and take care, everyone. This is difficult times you are living in, so yes, take care of you and your near and dear ones. Bye.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.